The clock on the wall showed 11:15 p.m. Professor Min-jae Kim sat at his desk with his head in his hands. Papers covered every surface of his small office. Some were neatly stacked. Most were crumpled into balls and scattered across the floor. The trash can overflowed with failed attempts and wrong answers. Min-jae stood up and walked to the whiteboard that took up the entire wall behind his desk. Numbers and symbols filled every inch of the white surface. He had written them, erased them, and written them again so many times that gray smudges covered the board. His hand held a blue marker, but he just stared at the equations without moving. This problem had consumed his life for 6 weeks now. 6 long weeks of thinking, calculating, and getting nowhere. The proof seemed simple enough when he first saw it. His colleague in Germany had sent it to him with a note that said it might be impossible to solve. Min-jae had laughed at that. He was one of the best mathematicians at the university. He had solved difficult problems before. This one would be no different. But he was wrong. So very wrong. The proof dealt with optimization theory, a branch of mathematics that helped people find the best solution to complex problems. Companies used it to save money. Engineers used it to design better buildings. Scientists used it to understand nature. If Min-jae could crack this proof, it would change everything. New possibilities would open up in fields from economics to physics. The International Mathematics Conference was in 3 days. 3 days. Min-jae was supposed to present this breakthrough to hundreds of the world's top mathematicians. He had already submitted his abstract. His name was in the program. People were expecting something revolutionary, but he had nothing. Nothing but pages of failed attempts and a whiteboard full of equations that led nowhere. Min-jae rubbed his eyes. They burned from staring at numbers for too long. His vision blurred when he tried to focus on the board. How many hours had he been here today? He had arrived at 7 a.m., the same as always. That meant he had been working for over 16 hours straight. His stomach growled. When had he last eaten? There was a half-eaten sandwich on his desk from lunch. Or was that from yesterday's lunch? He could not remember. The days blended together now. Work, sleep, work, sleep. Sometimes he skipped the sleep part entirely. His wife had stopped calling. After the first week of him missing dinner, then missing bedtime with their daughter, then missing entire evenings, she had given up. She knew how he got when he was working on a big problem. She had seen it before during his doctoral work, during his postdoctoral research, during his tenure review. But this was different. This time he was not making progress. He was just spinning in circles, chasing a solution that seemed to dance just out of reach. Min-jae turned back to the whiteboard and studied line 17 of his proof. This was where everything fell apart. Every single time. He could get through the first 16 steps perfectly. The logic flowed. The numbers made sense. But then he hit line 17 and the whole thing collapsed like a house of cards. He had tried 11 different approaches. He had asked his colleagues for help. Professor Chen from the physics department had spent 4 hours looking at it and found nothing. Dr. Williams from the mathematics department had taken the problem home for a weekend and returned with apologetic shrugs. Even his former graduate advisor, the brilliant Professor Lee, who had never met a problem she could not solve, had examined it during a video call and admitted she was stumped. The department head, Dean Park, had been supportive at first. This could put their university on the map, he had said. International recognition, he had said. More funding, better students, higher rankings. But as the weeks dragged on with no progress, his enthusiasm had turned to concern. Yesterday, he had asked Min-jae if perhaps they should withdraw from the conference. Perhaps this problem was indeed impossible, as the German colleague had suggested. Min-jae had refused. He was not a quitter. He had never been a quitter. When he was 10 years old, he had spent 3 months teaching himself to solve a Rubik's Cube. When he was 16, he had worked through an entire advanced calculus textbook on his own during summer vacation. When he was 25, he had published a paper that corrected a mistake in a proof that had stood for 30 years. He solved problems. That was what he did. That was who he was. But what if this time was different? What if Dean Park was right? What if this problem truly had no solution? No. He pushed the thought away. There was always a solution. Always. He just had not found it yet. Min-jae picked up his marker and went to erase line 17 again. Maybe if he approached it from a different angle. Maybe if he changed the boundary conditions. Maybe if he used a different theorem as his foundation. His hand stopped halfway to the board. He had tried all of those things already, some of them twice. He was going in circles, repeating the same failed attempts over and over, hoping for a different result. That was the definition of insanity, was it not? He threw the marker down on his desk. It bounced once and rolled onto the floor. He did not pick it up. The building was quiet around him. Most professors left by 6 p.m. The students cleared out by 9 p.m. even during exam season. Only Minjai remained night after night fighting a battle he could not win. He walked to the window and looked out at the campus below. The streetlights cast orange glows on the empty walkways. A few lights shone in the library across the quad. Some other poor soul was burning the midnight oil too. Probably a graduate student working on a thesis or an undergraduate cramming for an exam. Minjai felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. His legs trembled. His back ached from hours of standing at the whiteboard. His mind felt foggy and slow, like he was thinking through mud. Maybe he should go home. Get some sleep. Try again tomorrow with fresh eyes. But he had told himself that last night and the night before and the night before that. Each morning he woke up convinced that today would be the day he cracked it. Each night he found himself right back here, staring at the same impossible problem. He heard a sound in the hallway. A squeaking wheel. The janitor's cart. Minjai glanced at the clock again. 7:30 p.m., like clockwork, the night janitor made his rounds. Minjai had seen him countless times over the years, but had never paid much attention. Just another person doing their job, invisible in the way that support staff often were. The squeaking grew closer. Minjai turned back to his whiteboard, not wanting to be caught staring out the window like some defeated broken man. He picked up his marker from the floor and pretended to study the equations, as if he might suddenly see something new in the symbols he had stared at for 6 weeks. The cart stopped outside his door. Minjai could see the janitor's shadow in the frosted glass. There was a soft knock, so quiet he almost missed it. "Come in," Minjai called out, his voice hoarse from disuse. He had not spoken to another person since this morning's brief conversation with Dean Park. The door opened slowly. Sang-Woo Park pushed his cleaning cart through the door of Professor Kim's office. He was 52 years old with gray hair at his temples and deep lines around his eyes. His hands were rough and weathered from 15 years of mopping floors and scrubbing toilets. He wore the standard blue janitor's uniform with his name tag pinned to his chest. "I will just empty the trash, Professor," Sang-Woo said in quiet, accented English. He had learned the language late in life and still struggled with some words. But he could make himself understood well enough. Professor Kim barely looked up. He just waved a hand in acknowledgement and turned back to his whiteboard. Sang-Woo was used to this. Most people did not really see janitors. They looked through them as if they were ghosts or furniture. It had bothered him at first, all those years ago when he started this job. But he had grown accustomed to being invisible. Sometimes it was even peaceful. Sang-Woo rolled his cart to the corner where the trash can sat overflowing with crumpled papers. He pulled out a large garbage bag and began transferring the papers from the can. As he worked, his eyes wandered to the papers on the floor. He could not help it. Old habits died hard. Numbers and symbols covered every sheet. Complex equations filled the margins. Greek letters mixed with regular letters. Integrals and derivatives and functions stacked on top of each other. To most people it would look like nonsense. Random scribbles without meaning. But Sang-Woo understood every symbol. He knew what they meant. He knew what they were trying to do. And as he picked up the papers and stuffed them into his garbage bag, a small part of his heart ached with recognition and memory. He had written equations like these once. A lifetime ago. Sang-Woo finished with the floor trash and moved to the desk. Professor Kim had walked to the window and stood staring out at the dark campus. The professor's shoulders slumped forward. Even from behind, Sang-Woo could see the defeat in his posture. This was not the first time Sang-Woo had cleaned this office late at night. Over the past month, he had seen Professor Kim's decline. The professor used to be neat and organized. His desk had been clear. His papers had been stacked. His trash can had never overflowed, but as the weeks went on, chaos had taken over. The trash piled higher. The papers scattered wider. Professor Kim's appearance changed too. His hair grew messy. His clothes became wrinkled. The circles under his eyes got darker. He stopped going home at reasonable hours. Sang-Woo had watched this happen to other professors over the years. The pressure to publish, to present, to prove themselves. Academia was not kind to those who stumbled. Sang-Woo knew that better than most. He emptied the small trash can from under the desk and glanced at the papers scattered across the surface. More equations, more attempts, more failures by the look of the angry crossouts and frustrated scribbles. Then his eyes drifted to the whiteboard. Sang-woo froze. The garbage bag in his hand hung forgotten. His heart began to beat faster. He knew this problem. Not this exact problem, but its type, its structure, its family. The symbols and equations formed patterns that he recognized deep in his bones, in places where memory lived beyond conscious thought. This was an optimization problem. Advanced nonlinear optimization with boundary constraints. The professor was trying to prove a theorem about local minima in multidimensional space. Sang-woo could see it clearly now. The first 16 lines of the proof were solid, elegant even. Whoever wrote this knew what they were doing. But line 17. Oh, line 17. Sang-woo's eyes narrowed. He set down his garbage bag and took 3 steps closer to the whiteboard, forgetting for a moment where he was and who he was supposed to be. His janitor's uniform felt strange on his body, like a costume he had worn for so long that he had forgotten it was not really him. The boundary condition assumption in line 17 was wrong. Not obviously wrong, not stupidly wrong, but wrong in a subtle way that would make the entire proof collapse. The professor had assumed that the constraint set was convex over the entire domain. But from the earlier definitions in lines 4 and 5, that was not necessarily true. There could be regions where the constraint set curved back on itself, creating non-convex pockets. Sang-woo's mind raced ahead. If you adjusted the assumption, if you limited it to local regions rather than the global domain, if you used a different approach entirely, one based on variational methods instead of direct optimization, then maybe, yes, it could work. Is something wrong? Professor Kim's voice startled Sang-woo back to reality. The professor had turned from the window and was looking at him with a confused expression. Sang-woo realized he had been standing motionless in the middle of the office, staring at the whiteboard like a crazy person. No, Professor. Sorry, Professor. Sang-woo bowed slightly and returned to his cart. His face felt hot with embarrassment. What was he doing? He was a janitor. He cleaned toilets and mopped floors. He had no business staring at a professor's work. But as he picked up his garbage bag and prepared to leave, his eyes went back to the whiteboard one more time. He could not help it. The problem pulled at him like gravity. Professor Kim had turned back to the window. He looked so tired. So defeated? Sang-woo had seen that look before on other faces. Sometimes he saw it in the mirror. 15 years. 15 years he had worked in this building, walking these halls, cleaning these offices. 15 years of being invisible. 15 years of watching other people do the work he had once dreamed of doing himself. He had made his peace with it. Or so he thought. His life had taken the path it needed to take. He had made his choices and he did not regret them. His family had needed him. His wife had been sick. The medical bills had piled up like snow in winter. Someone had to pay them. Someone had to keep food on the table. Someone had to be the adult, the responsible one, the one who sacrificed dreams for reality. So he had left school, abandoned his doctoral program, taken the first stable job he could find, and he had never looked back. Never let himself look back, because looking back hurt too much. But now, standing in this office at 11:30 at night, looking at this problem on the whiteboard, something stirred inside him. Something he had thought was dead, a ghost of his former self reaching up from the grave of memory. He knew how to solve this problem. Or at least he knew where the professor was going wrong. He could see it so clearly. The error was right there in line 17, glowing like a neon sign. How could the professor not see it? How could his colleagues not see it? But of course they could not see it. They were approaching it from the wrong direction. They were using the wrong framework. They needed someone who had worked on variational methods, someone who had specialized in that particular corner of mathematical theory, someone like the graduate student Sang-woo had been. 25 years ago, should he say something? The thought appeared in his mind like a whisper. Should he tell the professor what he had noticed? No, that was ridiculous. He was a janitor. The professor would think he was crazy. Or worse, the professor would be offended that a janitor presumed to understand his work. Sang-woo had learned long ago that people did not like surprises that challenged their view of the world. A janitor who understood advanced mathematics was exactly that kind of surprise. He tied up his garbage bag and placed it on his cart. Time to move on to the next office. He had a whole building to clean before his shift ended at 6 a.m., but his feet did not move. He stood there, cart handle in his hand, staring at line 17 on that whiteboard. Professor Kim made a small sound. Not quite a sob, but close. The sound of a man at the end of his rope. Sang-woo had heard that sound before, too. He had made that sound himself once, sitting in a hospital room while doctors explained that his wife's treatment would cost more than he could earn in 5 years. The professor was a good man. Sang-woo had worked in this building long enough to know the difference between good professors and bad ones. Some ignored the janitors completely. Some were rude, snapping orders like servants should jump at their command. Some left their offices in deliberately messy conditions, as if to remind the cleaning staff of their place. But Professor Kim was different. He had learned Sang-woo's name. He always said good morning when they passed in the halls. He thanked Sang-woo when his office was cleaned. Small things and basic human decency, but rare enough in academia to be notable. A good man struggling with a problem that Sang-woo could help solve. His mouth opened before his brain could stop it. Professor Kim. His voice came out quiet, uncertain. The professor did not turn around. Sang-woo cleared his throat and tried again, a little louder. Professor Kim, forgive me for interrupting. This time the professor turned. He looked at Sang-woo with red, exhausted eyes. Yes? Now that he had the professor's attention, Sang-woo's courage faltered. What was he doing? This was insane. But he had started now. He had to finish. Sang-woo took a deep breath and pointed at the whiteboard with a shaking hand. I think there might be a problem with your boundary condition assumption. In line 17. Professor Kim stared at Sang-woo as if the janitor had suddenly started speaking in ancient Latin. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The silence in the office grew thick and strange. Sang-woo's hand was still pointing at the whiteboard. He lowered it slowly, feeling foolish. Of course, the professor was shocked. What janitor talked about boundary conditions? What cleaning person looked at advanced mathematics and claimed to see errors? I apologize, Professor, Sang-woo said quickly. It is not my place. I should go. He grabbed his card and started to turn toward the door. Wait. Professor Kim's voice stopped him. What did you just say? Sang-woo's heart pounded in his chest. He could still leave. Make a joke. Pretend he had been talking about something else. Keep his secrets buried where they belonged. But that ghost inside him, that former self, would not stay quiet now. It had been awakened after 25 years of sleep. Line 17, Sang-woo repeated, not looking at the professor. Your boundary condition assumption. You assume the constraint set is convex over the entire domain. But from your definitions in lines 4 and 5, this is not guaranteed. There could be non-convex regions. The silence that followed was different this time. Sang-woo risked a glance at Professor Kim. The professor's eyes had gone wide. His exhaustion seemed to vanish, replaced by intense focus. He turned to the whiteboard and stared at line 17. How do you... Professor Kim's voice trailed off. He looked back at Sang-woo, then at the whiteboard, then at Sang-woo again. How do you know what a constraint set is? This was the moment. The moment where Sang-woo could laugh it off, make up some excuse, and return to his safe, invisible life. Or the moment where he could tell the truth. After 25 years of silence. I studied mathematics once, Sang-woo said quietly. A long time ago. You studied mathematics. Professor Kim repeated the words slowly as if testing their reality. Where? What level? Sang-woo hesitated. The full truth felt too big, too heavy. But he had come this far. Here, at this university. I was a graduate student in the mathematics doctoral program. Professor Kim's jaw actually dropped. He walked over to his desk and sat down heavily in his chair, never taking his eyes off Sang-woo. You were a PhD student? In mathematics here? Yes, Professor. When? I started in 1998. I left in 2001. Professor Kim did the math in his head. 24 years ago. You were a doctoral student 24 years ago, and now you are... He gestured at Sang-woo's uniform, unable to finish the sentence. A janitor. Yes. Sang-woo said the word without shame. He had learned long ago that honest work was nothing to be ashamed of, regardless of what people thought. But why? How? Professor Kim leaned forward. His fatigue seemed completely forgotten now. What happened? Sang-woo had not told this story in so long. Most people in his current life did not know. His fellow janitors knew he was smart, that he was good with numbers, but they did not know the details. His children had been too young to remember when he left school. His wife had been the only one who knew the full story, and she had passed away 3 years ago. "My wife got sick," Sang-woo began. His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the cart handle tightly. "Cancer. We found out in my 3rd year of the program. The treatment was expensive. Very expensive. We had some insurance, but not enough. Not nearly enough." Professor Kim listened silently. "I had a scholarship, but it was small. Enough for tuition and a tiny apartment and basic food. Nothing extra. Nothing for medical emergencies." Sang-woo looked at the floor. Even after all these years, the memories hurt. "I tried to keep going. Tried to study and work and take care of her, but it was impossible. I could not be in the library when she needed help getting to the bathroom. I could not focus on research when the hospital was calling about unpaid bills. You had to choose," Professor Kim said softly. "Yes. I had to choose, and it was not really a choice at all." Sang-woo looked up and met the professor's eyes. "She was my wife, the mother of my children. What kind of man would I be if I let her suffer because I wanted to finish a degree? So you left school." "I left school. I found this job. It paid more than my scholarship and it was stable. Full-time. Benefits. I could work at night and take care of her during the day. When the children came home from school, I would sleep for a few hours, then come here." Professor Kim was quiet for a long moment. "Did she recover? Your wife?" "She went into remission for 17 years. We thought we had beaten it. Then it came back. 3 years ago. This time we could not win." Sang-woo's voice stayed steady, but something flickered in his eyes. The old pain never quite gone, but those 17 years were worth everything. "I got to see my children grow up. I got to grow old with her. We had a good life. A simple life, but good." "I am so sorry," Professor Kim said, and he meant it. Sang-woo could hear the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you, Professor. But I did not tell you this story to make you sad. I tell you so you understand. I was a real student once. I knew this work. I was even good at it." Professor Kim stood up suddenly. "Good at it? You were just good at it?" He walked to the whiteboard and pointed at line 17. "I have been stuck on this for 6 weeks. 6 weeks! I have asked every mathematician I know, people with decades of experience. And you see the problem in 30 seconds? Sometimes an outside eye sees what the focused eye misses," Sang-woo said. "And I specialized in variational methods. This is exactly the kind of problem I used to work on." "Variational methods," Professor Kim repeated. He looked at the proof again with new understanding. "I have been approaching this with direct optimization techniques." "You are right. That is why I keep hitting this wall." "The boundary condition is wrong for direct methods," Sang-woo said, warming to the topic despite himself. "But if you reformulate the problem using variational principles, you can avoid the convexity requirement entirely. The constraint set can be any shape." Professor Kim's hand started moving, gesturing in the air as his mind raced. "So instead of looking for a global minimum, I look for critical points of the action functional." "Yes, exactly." Sang-woo felt something strange happening inside him. A door he had locked 25 years ago was creaking open. Sunlight was streaming through the cracks. "And then you can use the Euler-Lagrange equations to characterize the solutions." "The Euler-Lagrange equations," Professor Kim whispered. He grabbed a marker and turned to a clean section of the whiteboard. "Can you show me, please?" Sang-woo looked at his cart. He should be moving on. He had other offices to clean. A whole building waiting for him. But that did not seem important anymore. Nothing seemed important except the mathematics. He left his cart by the door and walked to the whiteboard. Professor Kim handed him a marker. Sang-woo held it in his hand and stared at the blank white surface. How long had it been since he had done this? Since he had stood at a board and worked through a problem? His hand trembled slightly as he raised the marker to the board. Then he began to write. The symbols flowed from his hand like water from a tap that had been shut off for years. At first they came slowly, hesitantly, but then faster, smoother. His hand remembered what his mind had never forgotten. He wrote the functional, then the variations, then the necessary conditions for a critical point. The mathematics poured out of him, and as it did, Sang-woo felt something he had not felt in 25 years. Joy, pure, simple joy. This was who he had been. This was the person he had buried beneath years of mop buckets and trash bags and bathroom cleaners. That person had never really died. He had just been sleeping, waiting. Professor Kim watched in absolute silence. His eyes tracked every symbol, every equation, every line of reasoning. Sang-woo could feel the professor's understanding growing, could sense the exact moment when the solution clicked into place in the younger man's mind. When Sang-woo finished the reformulation and stepped back from the board, Professor Kim let out a long breath. "That is brilliant," he said. "That is absolutely brilliant. The whole problem just opens up when you approach it this way." Sang-woo set down the marker. His hand was covered in blue ink. Just like old times, he had forgotten how messy mathematics could be. It is not complete yet. This is just the reformulation. You still need to prove existence and uniqueness of solutions. But the path is clear now. "The path is clear," Professor Kim repeated. He looked at Sang-woo with something like wonder. "Who were you studying under when you were here?" "Professor Lee Mi-sun." Professor Kim's eyes went even wider. "Professor Lee? The Professor Lee? She is famous. One of the top mathematicians in the world. She was my advisor," Sang-woo said. "She was very kind to me, very patient. I was not the best student, but I tried hard." "Not the best student?" Professor Kim shook his head in disbelief. "If you could do this kind of work, you must have been exceptional." Sang-woo shrugged. "I was okay. There were others better than me. But I loved it. I loved mathematics the way some people love music or art. It was not just what I did. It was who I was." "Was," Professor Kim repeated sadly. Past tense. "Yes, was." Sang-woo looked at his janitor's uniform, at his rough hands, at his reflection in the dark window. "That person is gone now. I am someone else." But even as he said it, he wondered if it was true. The joy he had felt while writing on that whiteboard. The way his mind had come alive. The way the mathematics had flowed from him as if 25 years had been 25 minutes. Maybe that person was not as gone as he thought. Professor Kim did not say anything for a long moment. He stood there looking at the whiteboard, then at Sang-woo, then back at the whiteboard. His mind was clearly racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. Sang-woo felt exposed. Vulnerable. He had revealed himself in a way he had not done in decades. Part of him wanted to grab his cart and run from the office, to return to the safety of being invisible. But another part of him, the part that had just written mathematics on a whiteboard after 25 years, felt alive in a way he had almost forgotten was possible. "I should let you work," Sang-woo said, breaking the silence. "You have much to do before your conference." "Wait," Professor Kim said again. He seemed to say that word a lot tonight. "Please, do not go yet." Sang-woo paused with his hand on the cart. "Can you help me?" Professor Kim asked. "Can you help me finish this proof?" The question hung in the air between them. Sang-woo felt his heart beat faster. Help finish the proof? Actually work on mathematics again? It was like being offered water after wandering in a desert for 25 years. But reality pushed back. "Professor, I am a janitor. I clean offices. That is my job." "Your job is cleaning offices, but you are a mathematician," Professor Kim said firmly. "I just watched you solve in minutes what stumped me for weeks. I would be a fool not to ask for your help." "But what would people say? What would the university say?" "I do not care what people say." Professor Kim's voice was strong now, energized. "This is mathematics. Good ideas can come from anywhere, from anyone. If you can help me solve this problem, I do not care if you are a janitor or a professor or the person who delivers our mail." Sang-woo wanted to believe him, but he had lived in the real world for too long. "People will care, Professor. They will say a janitor cannot understand this work. They will say you are making a joke or trying to embarrass someone. They will not accept it." "Then they are fools," Professor Kim said simply. He walked to his desk and pulled out a chair. "Please sit just for a little while. Help me see if this approach can work." Sang-woo looked at the chair. Such a simple thing, a chair. But sitting in that chair meant something. It meant stepping back into a world he had left behind. It meant remembering who he used to be. It meant opening doors he had carefully locked. Was he ready for that? His wife's voice echoed in his memory. She had said something to him during her final weeks. Her body had been weak, but her mind had stayed sharp until nearly the end. "You gave up your dreams for me," she had told him. "I never wanted that. But you did it, and I love you for it. But Sang-woo, when I'm gone, please do not forget who you really are." He had told her he was exactly who he needed to be: a husband, a father, a provider. That was enough. "It is not enough," she had said, reading his thoughts like she always could. "You are those things, yes. But you are also more. You are still the man who loved mathematics. That part of you did not die just because life got hard. Promise me you will remember that," he had promised. But he had not kept that promise. He had buried that part of himself so deep that he thought it was gone forever. Until tonight. Sang-woo looked at Professor Kim's hopeful face. He looked at the whiteboard with his own handwriting on it. He looked at the chair being offered to him. Slowly, carefully, he walked to the chair and sat down. Professor Kim's face lit up like a child on his birthday. He grabbed his own chair and pulled it next to Sang-woo's, both of them facing the whiteboard. "Okay," he said. "Show me where to go from here." For the next hour, they worked together. Sang-woo's voice was quiet at first, hesitant. He would make a suggestion, then apologize for it. He would point something out, then say maybe he was wrong. 25 years of being invisible had taught him to make himself small, but Professor Kim would have none of it. "Stop apologizing," he said after the 5th time Sang-woo said sorry. "You are right. Your instincts are correct. Trust yourself, trust himself." That was harder than solving any mathematical problem. But slowly, gradually, Sang-woo's voice grew stronger. His suggestions became more confident. His ideas flowed more freely. The mathematics came back to him like riding a bicycle. The techniques he had learned decades ago were still there, stored in some deep part of his brain that time had not erased. Yes, some of the notation had changed. Yes, there were new methods he did not know. But the fundamentals were the same. The beauty of the logic, the elegance of a well-constructed proof, the satisfaction of seeing how pieces fit together. All of that was exactly as he remembered. Professor Kim wrote on the whiteboard while Sang-woo talked. Sometimes the professor would stop and ask questions. Sometimes he would suggest modifications. They were collaborating. Two mathematicians working on a problem together, one in a professor's casual clothes and one in a janitor's uniform. Around midnight, they hit a tricky spot in the proof. The existence part was coming together nicely, but the uniqueness was giving them trouble. Sang-woo sat back in his chair and thought hard. There was something at the edge of his memory, some technique he had read about in a paper during his graduate school days. There was a mathematician, Sang-woo said slowly. Norwegian, I think. Or maybe Swedish. He published a paper about uniqueness conditions for variational problems in constrained domains. I read it in 2000 or maybe 2001. He used a clever trick with the second variation. Professor Kim grabbed his laptop and started searching. Norwegian mathematician, variational problem, second variation. Do you remember his name? Sang-woo closed his eyes and tried to remember. So long ago. So many papers read and forgotten. But this one had impressed him at the time. The author's name had been unusual. Sven something. Or Sten. No, wait, Bjorn. Bjorn Anderson. Or Anderson. English spelling, maybe. Professor Kim typed frantically. Bjorn Anderson, variational. He stopped. Got it? Bjorn Anderson, University of Oslo. Published 2000 in the Journal of Functional Analysis. Uniqueness criteria for constrained variational problems in non-convex domains. That is it. Sang-woo leaned forward excitedly. That is the paper. He uses a contradiction argument with the second variation. If you assume two different solutions exist, you can show that the second variation must be negative definite, which violates the minimization condition. Professor Kim was already downloading the paper. This is perfect. This is exactly what we need. He looked at Sang-woo with amazement. You remembered a paper from 25 years ago. Just from reading it once as a student, Sang-woo felt embarrassed by the praise. I read many papers in those days. Most I forgot. But some stuck with me. The really clever ones. The ones that made me see problems differently. That is what great mathematicians do, Professor Kim said. They remember the important stuff. Not just formulas, but ideas. Ways of thinking. They spent another 30 minutes adapting Anderson's technique to their specific problem. It fit beautifully. The uniqueness proof fell into place like the final piece of a jigsaw puzzle. By 1 in the morning, they had a complete outline. The proof was not finished. They would need to fill in details, check calculations, verify each step carefully. But the path was clear. The major obstacles had been overcome. It worked. Professor Kim stood up and stretched. I cannot believe it. 6 weeks of torture, and in 2 hours with you, we crack it. You did most of the work over those 6 weeks, Sang-woo said modestly. I just saw the problem with fresh eyes. Fresh eyes that belonged to someone who specialized in exactly the right area of mathematics. Professor Kim shook his head. What are the odds? What are the odds that the one person who could help me was right here, cleaning my office? Sang-woo smiled slightly. Life is strange sometimes. Professor Kim looked at him seriously. I want to list you as a co-author on this paper. When I publish it, your name should be on it too. Sang-woo's smile faded. Professor, I do not think that is a good idea. Why not? You solved the core problem. Without you, there is no paper. Because I am a janitor, Sang-woo said bluntly. When people see a janitor listed as co-author on an advanced mathematics paper, they will think it is a joke. They will think you are mocking them or making some kind of statement. It will hurt your reputation. I do not care about my reputation if it means treating you unfairly. I care about your reputation, Sang-woo said firmly. You have worked hard to build your career. I will not let my situation damage that. Besides, I did this because I wanted to help. Because I love mathematics, not for credit or recognition. Professor Kim looked like he wanted to argue more, but Sang-woo stood up. It is late, Professor. You should get some sleep. You have much work to do tomorrow, filling in all the details of the proof. I should finish my cleaning rounds. Will you come back tomorrow night? Professor Kim asked, please. I might need help with the details. Sang-woo hesitated. Coming back meant continuing this. Continuing meant getting more attached. Getting more attached meant more pain when it ended, as it inevitably would. He should say no. He should return to his safe, simple life. But he thought of his wife's words again. Remember who you really are. I will come back, he said softly. If you want my help, I will give it. Professor Kim smiled with relief. Thank you, really. Thank you so much. Sang-woo returned to his cart and rolled it toward the door. As he reached the threshold, Professor Kim called out one more time. Sang-woo. He turned back. You said you were not the best student, that others were better than you. Professor Kim gestured at the whiteboard covered in their work. I think your Professor Lee would disagree. I think you were probably one of the best students she ever had. Sang-woo did not know what to say to that, so he just nodded and left the office, his cart squeaking down the empty hallway. Behind him, Professor Kim stood in his office looking at the whiteboard full of mathematics. Half of it was in his handwriting. The other half was in the careful, precise script of a janitor who had once been a graduate student. 2 different lives. 2 different people. But tonight, for a few hours, they had been just 2 mathematicians working on a beautiful problem. And they had solved it. The next night, Sang-woo arrived at the mathematics building at 11 p.m., same as always. He punched his time card, loaded his cart with supplies, and began his rounds on the first floor. But his mind was not on cleaning. His mind was on line 17 and variational methods and a whiteboard covered in blue ink. He told himself to be realistic. Professor Kim had been grateful last night, yes. But in the clear light of day, the professor would remember that Sang-woo was just the janitor. Whatever magic had happened last night was a one-time thing, born of desperation and late-night delirium. It would not happen again. So Sang-woo cleaned the first-floor offices slowly, carefully. He took his time. When he reached the 3rd floor where Professor Kim's office was located, his heart beat faster despite his efforts to stay calm. The light was on in the professor's office. Sang-woo could see it under the door. He knocked quietly, the same soft knock as always. Come in. Professor Kim's voice sounded excited, energetic. Sang-woo pushed the door open. Professor Kim sat at his desk, surrounded by papers. But unlike last night, these papers were organized. Stacked neatly. The chaos had been replaced by order. The professor looked up and his face broke into a huge smile. Sang-woo, you came. I was hoping you would. Professor Kim jumped up from his chair. Come look at this. I spent all day working on the details, and I think I have the existence proof completely worked out. Sang-woo felt something loosen in his chest. The professor was still excited, still wanted his help. It had not been a dream or a mistake. Let me empty your trash first, Professor. Forget the trash, Professor Kim said, waving his hand. I mean, you can do it later if you want, but please come look at this first. Tell me if I made any mistakes. Sang-woo parked his cart and walked to the desk. Professor Kim had printed out 6 pages of dense mathematical text. The existence proof written in careful detail. Sang-woo picked up the pages and began to read. He read slowly, checking each line, each assumption, each logical step. Professor Kim watched him anxiously, like a student waiting for a grade. Sang-woo made small noises as he read. When something was interesting. When something was clever. On page 4, he stopped. He read one section twice, then 3 times. His finger traced along a particular line. What? Professor Kim asked nervously. What is wrong? This step here, Sang-woo pointed. Where you bound the functional from below. I think you need an extra condition. The Sobolev embedding needs the domain to be sufficiently regular. You should add a note that you assume the boundary is Lipschitz continuous. Professor Kim leaned over to look. Oh, you are right. I was assuming that implicitly, but I should state it explicitly. He grabbed a pen and made a note in the margin. What else? Sang-woo continued reading. He found 2 more small issues, both easily fixed. But overall the proof was solid, very solid. This is excellent work, Professor. The logic is clear, the steps are justified. I think this part is done. Professor Kim let out a breath of relief. Really? You think it is good? I think it is very good. Better than good. It is elegant. Sang-woo set down the papers. You have a gift for clear mathematical writing. I remember struggling with that when I was a student. My proofs always worked, but they were messy. Hard to follow. You make this look simple. Professor Kim looked pleased by the compliment. Now I need to work on the uniqueness part. Using that Anderson paper you remembered. Can you help me with that? And just like that, they fell into it again. 2 mathematicians working together. Professor Kim at his laptop typing. Sang-woo standing by the whiteboard suggesting, explaining, correcting. The hours slipped past without notice. Around 2 a.m. they hit another difficult spot. The uniqueness proof required showing that a certain operator was strictly monotone. They had been circling around the problem for 30 minutes trying different approaches. What if we use a compactness argument? Professor Kim suggested. Sang-woo shook his head. The space is infinite dimensional. Compactness is hard to get. A fixed point theorem? Maybe, but I cannot see how to set it up. They sat in frustrated silence. Sang-woo closed his eyes and thought. His mind wandered through old memories of graduate school, of papers he had read, of seminars he had attended. There was something about monotone operators. Where had he learned it? Then it came to him. Not from a paper, from a conversation. One of his fellow graduate students, a woman named Park Ji-young, had been working on monotone operator theory. They had talked about it over lunch one day. She had explained a beautiful trick for proving strict monotonicity using directional derivatives. I have an idea, Sang-woo said, opening his eyes. It is a bit technical, but I think it will work. We look at the directional derivative of the operator in the direction of the difference between 2 potential solutions. If we can show that this directional derivative is strictly positive, then the operator is strictly monotone. Professor Kim's eyes lit up. Yes, that could work. He started writing on the whiteboard. So if we have 2 solutions u and v, we look at the derivative in the direction u minus vi. They worked out the details together, passing the marker back and forth. Sang-woo's hand shook less tonight. His voice was more confident. He was falling back into the rhythm of mathematical thinking, like a musician who had not played in years but whose fingers still remembered the songs. By 3 a.m., they had it. The uniqueness proof was complete. Professor Kim sat back and stared at the whiteboard with wonder. We did it. We actually did it. The whole proof is done. Sang-woo felt a wave of satisfaction. Not just satisfaction, joy. Pure mathematical joy. They had solved a beautiful problem in a beautiful way. This was why he had fallen in love with mathematics in the first place. This feeling right here. You need to write it all up properly, Sang-woo said. Get it formatted for submission to a journal. You have only 2 days until your conference. I can do it, Professor Kim said confidently. I will work all day tomorrow. I can have a draft ready by tomorrow night. Will you look at it? Make sure I did not make any mistakes in the final version? Of course. Professor Kim stood up and stretched. He looked at Sang-woo seriously. I still think you should be listed as co-author. This is your work as much as mine. They had this same argument last night. Sang-woo gave the same answer. No, Professor. We discussed this. It would cause problems. Then at least let me acknowledge you in the paper. I can write a note thanking you for your helpful suggestions. Sang-woo considered this. An acknowledgement was different from authorship. Less visible, less likely to cause questions. What would you say? Professor Kim thought for a moment. I would say, the author thanks Sang-woo Park for many helpful conversations that were essential to this work. Something like that. No mention of your job, just your name and that you helped. It was still risky. Someone might ask questions. But Sang-woo found he did not care as much as he thought he would. He had spent 25 years being invisible. Maybe it was okay to be seen, just a little bit. All right, he agreed. You can acknowledge me, Professor Kim smiled. Good, that is settled then. He started gathering his papers. I should go home and get some sleep. I have a long day tomorrow, Sang-woo nodded, and I have offices to clean. I have been neglecting my work. I am sorry. I have been keeping you from your job. Do not be sorry. This has been... Sang-woo paused, searching for the right word. This has been special. I did not know how much I missed this. The mathematics, the problem-solving, the collaboration. Thank you for letting me be part of it. Professor Kim looked at him with emotion in his eyes. Thank you for saving my work. For saving me. I was drowning, and you threw me a lifeline. They stood there in the office. Two men from completely different worlds who had found common ground in the universal language of mathematics. Professor Kim packed up his laptop and prepared to leave. At the door, he turned back. Sang-woo, can I ask you something personal? Yes. Do you ever regret it? Leaving mathematics? Choosing your family over your career? Sang-woo thought about this question. He had asked himself the same thing many times over the years. I regret that I had to choose. I regret that the world forced me to pick between my wife and my dreams. But I do not regret the choice I made. My wife was worth it. My family was worth it. Mathematics is beautiful, but love is more important. Professor Kim nodded slowly. You are a better man than me. I am not sure I could have made that sacrifice, Wine. You do not know what you can do until you have to do it, Sang-woo said. We all have more strength than we think. Professor Kim left and Sang-woo returned to his cart. He finished cleaning the 3rd floor, then moved to the 4th. But his mind kept returning to Professor Kim's question. Did he regret it? The honest answer was complicated. He regretted what he had lost. He regretted the career that never was, the papers he never published, the contributions he never made to mathematics. He regretted that his name would never be known, that his work would never be remembered. But he did not regret his choice. His wife had lived 17 years in remission, 17 years where they raised their children, celebrated birthdays and holidays, grew old together. His son was now an engineer. His daughter was a teacher. Both good people with good lives. They had that because he made the choice he made. And now, after 25 years, he had gotten 2 nights of mathematics. 2 nights of being the person he used to be. 2 nights of using his mind in the way it was meant to be used. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that had to be enough. Sang-woo finished the 4th floor and moved to the 5th. The building was silent around him except for the squeak of his cartwheels and the hum of the ventilation system. The university slept, unaware that in one small office a problem had been solved by an unlikely partnership. Tomorrow night, he would look at Professor Kim's draft. He would check it one final time. And then it would be over. The professor would go to his conference, present his breakthrough, and move forward with his career. And Sang-woo would return to being invisible, a janitor who cleaned offices and emptied trash cans. But he would know. He would always know. He had been part of something important, something beautiful, and nobody could take that away from him. He smiled as he mopped the hallway floor. After 25 years of sleeping, the mathematician inside him had woken up. And even though he would have to go back to sleep soon, he was grateful for these few nights of being alive again. Sang-woo did not sleep well that day. He went home at 6 a.m. after his shift ended, ate a simple breakfast, and lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. His mind would not stop thinking about the proof, about variational methods, about the beautiful way the solution had come together. His daughter called at noon to check on him. She worried about him living alone since her mother died. Are you eating properly, Appa? Are you getting enough sleep? I am fine, he told her. Just thinking about some things. What things? He almost told her. Almost said, I have been doing mathematics again. The thing I gave up before you were born. The thing I used to love. But he stopped himself. It would sound crazy. It would worry her. So instead he said, nothing important, just old memories. That night Sang-woo arrived at work early. He was at the mathematics building by 10:30 p.m. instead of his usual 11 p.m. He told himself it was because he wanted to finish his rounds early, but the truth was he was eager to see Professor Kim's final draft. He worked quickly through the first and second floors. By 11:15 p.m. he was on the third floor, pushing his cart toward Professor Kim's office. The light was on. Sang-woo knocked. "Come in." Professor Kim called. Sang-woo entered. The office looked completely different from 2 nights ago. The papers were organized. The trash was empty. Professor Kim had clearly cleaned up himself. The professor sat at his desk looking exhausted but happy, his laptop open in front of him. "I finished it," Professor Kim announced proudly. "The complete proof properly formatted, ready for the journal. 23 pages. Want to see?" Sang-woo did want to see very much. He left his cart by the door and approached the desk. Professor Kim turned the laptop so Sang-woo could read the screen. The title read, "A Variational Approach to Nonlinear Optimization in Non-Convex Constraint Sets." Below that, a single author, Min-jae Kim. And then at the bottom of the title page, in smaller text, acknowledgments. The author thanks Sang-woo Park for many helpful conversations that were essential to this work. Sang-woo felt something catch in his throat. There was his name. In a real mathematics paper, after 25 years his name was back in the world of mathematics, even if just in a small acknowledgement. He began reading the paper carefully. Professor Kim watched him anxiously, fidgeting with a pen. Sang-woo read slowly, checking every line, every equation, every logical step. The work was excellent. Clear, rigorous, elegant, everything a good mathematical proof should be. "It is perfect," Sang-woo said finally. "You did excellent work, Professor. This will be very well received." Professor Kim sagged with relief. "Thank you. I could not have done this without you. You know that, right?" Before Sang-woo could respond, there was a knock at the door. Both men looked up in surprise. It was nearly midnight. Who else would be in the building? "Come in," Professor Kim called. The door opened. Dean Park entered, followed by 2 other professors that Sang-woo recognized from seeing them in the hallways. Professor Chen from physics and Dr. Williams from mathematics. All 3 stopped short when they saw Sang-woo standing by Professor Kim's desk. "Oh," Dean Park said, looking confused. "I'm sorry, Min-jae. I did not realize you had a visitor. We can come back." No, please come in," Professor Kim said, standing up quickly. "This is perfect timing, actually. I was just showing Sang-woo my finished proof." The 3 newcomers looked at each other, then at Sang-woo in his janitor's uniform, then back at Professor Kim. The confusion on their faces was obvious. "Showing the janitor your proof?" Dr. Williams said carefully, as if afraid he had misunderstood. "Not just showing him, getting his final check on it." Professor Kim seemed to realize how strange this looked. "I should explain. Sang-woo is the one who helped me solve it." Now the confusion turned to complete bewilderment. Dean Park actually laughed, thinking it was a joke. "I am sorry, what?" Professor Kim took a deep breath. 2 nights ago I was stuck on this proof. Completely stuck. Sang-woo was cleaning my office and he noticed my boundary condition assumption in line 17 was wrong. He pointed out the error and suggested using variational methods instead. We have been working on it together for the past 2 nights. The proof is done because of him. The 3 visitors stood frozen. They looked at Sang-woo like he had suddenly grown a second head. "The janitor solved your mathematics problem," Dr. Williams said slowly, as if testing whether the words made sense when spoken aloud. Sang-woo felt his face grow hot. This was exactly what he had feared. The disbelief, the awkwardness. "Professors, please. Professor Kim is being too generous. I just made a small suggestion." "A small suggestion?" Professor Kim turned to the others. He identified the core problem in 30 seconds. A problem that stumped me for 6 weeks. A problem that I asked all of you about. He then reformulated the entire approach using variational principles and helped me work out both the existence and uniqueness proofs. That is not a small suggestion. Professor Chen found his voice. How could a janitor possibly know about variational methods? "Because I was a graduate student here," Sang-woo said quietly. "In this department. From 1998 to 2001. The silence that followed was deafening. Dean Park's mouth literally hung open. Dr. Williams grabbed the desk for support. "You were a graduate student," Dean Park repeated. "Here, in mathematics." "Yes, sir." "And now you are a janitor." "Yes, sir." "What happened?" Professor Chen asked, not unkindly. "Why did you leave the program?" Sang-woo told his story again. His wife's illness, the impossible choice, the 25 years of cleaning buildings. The three professors listened in complete silence. When he finished, Dean Park sat down heavily in a chair. "Professor Lee was your advisor," Dean Park said. "Professor Lee, my son. She still talks about her former students sometimes. Did she know you became a janitor?" "No," Sang-woo said. "I left before finishing. I never contacted her again. I was too ashamed." "Ashamed?" Dr. Williams shook his head. "You made an incredible sacrifice for your family. That is nothing to be ashamed of. But I failed. I did not finish what I started." Professor Kim interrupted. "You did not fail. Life happened. You made a choice. And now, 25 years later, you still have it. The gift, the understanding. You solved this problem like you had been doing mathematics yesterday instead of decades ago." Dean Park was looking at Sang-woo with a strange expression. "Do you still have your transcript? Your records from when you were a student? I suppose the university still has them." "Why?" Dean Park stood up suddenly. "Wait here. All of you. I need to make a phone call." He pulled out his cell phone and walked out into the hallway. The remaining people looked at each other awkwardly. Sang-woo felt like he wanted to disappear. This was getting out of control. He should have just stayed silent that first night, should have kept his knowledge to himself. Professor Chen approached him. "Can I ask what you were working on when you left? What was your dissertation topic?" "Variational methods for optimal control problems in infinite dimensional spaces," Sang-woo answered. Professor Chen's eyebrows went up. "That is very advanced work. I had completed most of the research, I just needed to write the dissertation. But then everything fell apart." Dean Park came back into the office, his phone still in his hand. His face was flushed with excitement. "I just spoke with the university president. I told her the situation. She wants to meet you, Sang-woo. Tomorrow. Can you come to her office at 10 a.m.? I work at night. I sleep during the day. Call in sick," Dean Park said. "Or tell your supervisor it is an emergency. This is important." "What is this about?" Sang-woo asked nervously. Dean Park smiled. "I cannot promise anything yet, but the university may want to offer you an opportunity, a chance to finish what you started." Sang-woo felt the room spin slightly. "I do not understand." Professor Kim put a hand on his shoulder. "I think they want to give you your PhD, and maybe more. But I am 52 years old. I have been out of mathematics for 25 years. I am a janitor. You are a mathematician," Professor Kim said firmly. "You were always a mathematician. The job you do to pay bills does not change that. Your mind is still sharp. Your understanding is still deep. You proved that over the past 2 nights." Dr. Williams spoke up. "Min-jae is right. I read about cases like this sometimes. People who leave academia and come back later. It happens. If you want to finish your degree, I think the university would support that. And the department needs people like you," Professor Chen added. "We could use someone who specializes in variational methods. Our current faculty are strong in other areas, but that particular field is underrepresented." Sang-woo looked at all of them. 4 educated men, all with prestigious positions, all looking at him with respect and excitement. It felt surreal. 2 nights ago he was invisible. Now he was being told he might have a future in mathematics. "I need to think," Sang-woo said. "This is too much, too fast." "Of course," Dean Park said. "But please come tomorrow. Meet with President Han. Hear what she has to say. Then you can decide." After they left, only Professor Kim remained. He looked at Sang-woo with concern. "Are you okay? You look overwhelmed." "I am overwhelmed," Sang-woo admitted. He sat down in a chair, his legs suddenly weak. 2 nights ago, I was just the janitor. Now they want me to meet the university president? You were never just the janitor, Professor Kim said gently. You just forgot who you really were. The rest of us forgot too. We looked past you every day, not seeing the brilliant mind behind the uniform. That was our failure, not yours. Sang-woo put his head in his hands. My wife. She told me before she died. She told me not to forget who I was. But I did forget. I buried that person so deep I thought he was gone forever. But he is not gone, Professor Kim said. He has been here all along, just waiting. And now, maybe, just maybe, he can come back. Sang-woo looked up. What if I am too old? What if I cannot do it anymore? You solved this proof in 2 nights. You are not too old. What if they are wrong? What if this is just pity? It is not pity. It is recognition. Finally, after 25 years, someone sees you for who you really are. Sang-woo sat there for a long time, thinking, remembering, imagining. Could he really do this? Could he really step back into that world? His wife's voice echoed in his memory again. Remember who you are. Maybe it was time to remember. Maybe it was time to stop being invisible. I will go tomorrow, Sang-woo said finally. I will meet with President Han. I will listen to what she has to say. Professor Kim smiled with relief. Good, that is all I ask. Just listen. Then decide. Sang-woo stood up, his decision made. But tonight, I still have offices to clean. That is still my job. For now, Professor Kim said. But maybe not for much longer. Sang-woo did not sleep at all that day. He tried, lying in his bed with his eyes closed, but his mind would not stop racing. At 9 a.m., he gave up and took a shower. He looked at his clothes and realized he had nothing appropriate to wear to meet a university president. His wardrobe consisted of janitor uniforms and old casual clothes. Finally, he pulled out a suit he had worn to his wife's funeral 3 years ago. It still fit, though it smelled slightly of mothballs. At 9:45 a.m., Sang-woo stood outside the administration building. He had walked past this building thousands of times over the past 15 years, but he had never gone inside. This was where the important people worked, the decision makers, the ones who shaped the university's future. Not people like him, but today he climbed the steps and walked through the main doors. A receptionist looked up at him with a polite smile. Can I help you? I have a meeting with President Han at 10 a.m. My name is Sang-woo Park. The receptionist checked her computer and her professional smile became more genuine. Yes, Mr. Park. Please have a seat. President Han will be with you shortly. Sang-woo sat in an elegant waiting area with leather chairs and art on the walls. His hands were sweating. What was he doing here? This was crazy. He was a janitor. Just a janitor. No, not just a janitor. He was also a mathematician. Professor Kim had said so. Maybe it was time to believe it. At exactly 10 a.m., a door opened and President Han emerged. She was a woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She smiled warmly at Sang-woo and extended her hand. Mr. Park, thank you for coming. Please come into my office. Sang-woo followed her into a large office with windows overlooking the campus. Dean Park was already there, along with Professor Kim. Sang-woo felt relieved to see a familiar face. Please sit, President Han said, gesturing to a chair. Can I get you coffee? Tea? No, thank you, Sang-woo said, sitting carefully. President Han sat behind her desk and folded her hands. Mr. Park, I heard your story from Dean Park last night. It is quite remarkable. You were a graduate student here 25 years ago, and you left to care for your sick wife. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. And you have been working as a janitor in the mathematics building for 15 years. Yes, ma'am. During which time, nobody realized that you had advanced mathematical training. Not until a few nights ago when you helped Professor Kim solve a difficult problem. That is correct. President Han leaned forward. Mr. Park, I believe the university failed you. We have systems in place to help students who face financial hardships. We have emergency funds, payment plans, possibilities for extended leave. If you had come to us 25 years ago, we might have found a way to help you stay in the program. Sang-woo had not expected this. I did not think anyone would care. My wife was sick. I needed money immediately. I thought leaving was the only option. It should not have been the only option, President Han said firmly. But that was then. This is now. We cannot change the past, but we can change the future. I would like to offer you an opportunity to complete your PhD. The words hung in the air. Complete his PhD after 25 years, it seemed impossible. How would that work? Sang-woo asked. I left before finishing my dissertation. All my research is decades old. Dean Park spoke up. We checked your records. You completed all your coursework. You passed your qualifying exams with distinction. You had completed most of your research. You just needed to write and defend your dissertation. My research was about optimal control problems. That field has advanced significantly in 25 years. My work is probably obsolete now. Not obsolete, Professor Kim said. I did some checking last night. Your research topic is still relevant. In fact, some of the approaches you were developing are still being used today. You were ahead of your time. President Han nodded. Here's what I propose. We reinstate you as a doctoral student. You would need to update your research to account for developments in the field over the past 25 years. Write your dissertation, then defend it before a committee. If you pass, we award you your PhD. Sang-woo felt overwhelmed. But I have no funding. I still need to work to pay my bills. We can offer you a research fellowship, Dean Park said, a stipend that covers living expenses. Not generous, but enough to live on. You would also have an office in the mathematics building and access to all university resources. How long would this take? Sang-woo asked. I am 52 years old. I cannot spend years on this. Given your existing work, I estimate 1 year, Professor Kim said. Maybe less if you work efficiently. You are not starting from zero. You are finishing what you started. Sang-woo sat back in his chair. 1 year. 1 year to reclaim a dream he had abandoned decades ago. But what about his life? His job? His routine? As if reading his mind, President Han said, I understand this is a big decision. You have built a life here. You have stability. We are asking you to take a risk. My children, Sang-woo said. They are grown now. Both have good jobs. They do not need my financial support anymore. But I do not know what they would think about this. What do you think about it? Professor Kim asked gently. That is what matters. Sang-woo closed his eyes. What did he think? He thought about his wife's words. He thought about the joy he had felt working on mathematics these past 2 nights. He thought about spending the rest of his life cleaning offices wondering what might have been. I think I want to do it, he said quietly. I think I want to finish what I started. President Han smiled. Then we have an agreement. We will prepare the paperwork. You can start as soon as you are ready. There is one more thing, Dean Park said. After you complete your PhD, if you are interested, we would like to consider you for a position in the department. We need someone with your expertise in variational methods. It would not be a tenure-track position at first, but a research fellow position that could lead to something more permanent. Sang-woo stared at him. You would hire me? As a professor? As a researcher initially, Dean Park clarified. But yes, with the possibility of becoming a professor if you publish good work and contribute to the department. You have already proven you can do high-level mathematics. The question is whether you want to. Did he want to? The answer was obvious. Of course he wanted to. This was what he had dreamed of when he was young. This was who he had always been underneath the janitor's uniform. Yes, Sang-woo said. I want to do this. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises to send paperwork. Sang-woo walked out of the administration building in a daze. His entire life had just changed in the span of an hour. Professor Kim walked with him across campus. How do you feel? Terrified, Sang-woo admitted. What if I cannot do it? What if I am too old, too rusty? You will be fine. Better than fine. You will be excellent. Professor Kim stopped walking and looked at Sang-woo seriously. Can I ask you something? Why did you not tell anyone before? All these years you worked in that building surrounded by mathematics. Why did you stay silent? Sang-woo thought about this. Because I was ashamed. I felt like I had failed. Everyone else in my graduate cohort finished their degrees. They became professors, researchers, important people, and I became a janitor. I did not want anyone to know what I had given up. But you did not give up. You made a choice. There is a difference, maybe, but it did not feel different. It felt like failure. And now? Professor Kim asked. How does it feel now? Sang-woo looked around the campus. Students walked between classes. Professors hurried to meetings. The university buzzed with intellectual energy. Soon he would be part of this world again, not as a janitor, but as a scholar. Now it feels like a second chance, Sang-woo said, like maybe the story is not over yet. 3 days later, Professor Kim presented his proof at the International Mathematics Conference. The presentation was a huge success. Mathematicians from around the world praised the elegance of the variational approach. Several people approached Professor Kim afterward, asking about the acknowledgement to Sang-woo Park. Who is he? I do not recognize the name. Professor Kim smiled and told them the story. A janitor who was really a mathematician, a man who had given up his dreams for love. A second chance discovered in the middle of the night. The story spread through the conference like wildfire. Within a week, news articles appeared. University janitor solves mathematical proof that stumped professors. The headline was somewhat misleading, but it captured people's imagination. Sang-woo's story went viral on social media. People loved the narrative of hidden genius, of second chances, of justice finally being served. Sang-woo found the attention uncomfortable. He was not used to being visible. But his children were proud. His son called him crying. Appa, I had no idea. Why did you never tell us about your past? Because I thought it did not matter anymore, Sang-woo told him. But maybe it always mattered. Maybe we cannot really leave behind who we are. His daughter helped him move from his small apartment to university housing for graduate students. It felt strange to be a student again at 52, but also right somehow, like putting on an old coat and finding it still fit. Professor Kim became his unofficial mentor, helping him navigate the modern academic world. Things had changed significantly in 25 years. Papers were submitted online now instead of by mail. Research was shared instantly across the world. The pace of mathematics had accelerated dramatically, but the core remained the same. The beauty of a well-constructed proof, the satisfaction of solving a difficult problem, the joy of understanding something new about the universe. That had not changed at all. Sang-woo threw himself into his dissertation work. He spent his days in the library reading papers, catching up on 25 years of developments in his field. He spent his nights at a whiteboard in his new office working through problems, developing new theorems. It was hard. Harder than he expected. His mind was not as quick as it had been at 27. He got tired more easily. He had to write things down more often because his memory was not as sharp. But he persisted. After 6 months, he had made significant progress. His old research, updated with modern techniques, was shaping into a strong dissertation. He began writing, carefully crafting each chapter, each proof, each argument. After 10 months, he submitted his completed dissertation to his committee. The defense was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Sang-woo was nervous but ready. The defense took place in a large conference room. His committee consisted of 5 professors, including Professor Kim and his old advisor, Professor Lee. She had flown in specifically for the defense, and when she saw Sang-woo for the first time in 25 years, she had tears in her eyes. I always wondered what happened to you, she told him before the defense. You were one of my most promising students. I was heartbroken when you disappeared. I am sorry I never contacted you, Sang-woo said. I was ashamed. You had nothing to be ashamed of, Professor Lee said firmly. You made a brave choice, and now you are here finishing what you started. I am proud of you. The defense itself was intense. The committee asked difficult questions. They challenged his assumptions, his methods, his conclusions. But Sang-woo answered confidently. He had lived with this research for months now. He knew it inside and out. After 2 hours, the committee asked him to leave the room while they deliberated. Sang-woo waited outside, pacing nervously. Professor Kim waited with him. You did great, he assured Sang-woo. I have never seen a better defense. Finally, the door opened. Professor Lee smiled at him. Congratulations, Dr. Park, Dr. Park. After 25 years, he had his title. He had his PhD. He had finished what he started. The university held a small ceremony. President Han personally handed Sang-woo his diploma. Reporters were there, documenting the moment when the janitor officially became a doctor of mathematics. Sang-woo's children sat in the front row, beaming with pride. After the ceremony, Dean Park approached Sang-woo with an offer letter. A position as a research fellow in the mathematics department, a real salary and office, the possibility of becoming a professor eventually. Sang-woo accepted on the spot, but he had one request. He asked if he could establish a fund to help other students who faced financial hardships. Students who might have to choose between their education and their families. The university agreed, and Sang-woo donated the first $10,000, money he had saved over his years as a janitor. The fund was named the Second Chances Scholarship. It would help dozens of students over the years, ensuring that financial emergencies did not end academic dreams. 1 year after that night when he had pointed at line 17, Sang-woo stood in a classroom teaching his first course, Introduction to Variational Methods. 20 students looked up at him with interested faces. He wrote an equation on the board. His hand was steady. His writing was clear. He was home. After class, Professor Kim stopped by his office. How does it feel? Being a professor? I am not a professor yet. Just a research fellow. You will be a professor, Professor Kim said confidently. You are already publishing papers. You are an excellent teacher. It is just a matter of time. Sang-woo looked around his office. Books on shelves. Papers on his desk. A whiteboard covered in equations. This was his space now. His world. It feels like a dream, he admitted. Sometimes I wake up and worry that it is not real. That I will go back to being a janitor. It is real, Professor Kim assured him. And you earned it. You never stopped being a mathematician, even when you were cleaning offices. You just forgot for a while. Now you remember? Yes, Sang-woo thought. Now he remembered. After 25 years of being invisible, he was finally visible again. Not because of his job or his title, but because of his mind, his work, his contribution. He thought of his wife often. He wished she could see this. Wished she could know that the sacrifice he made for her had not been the end of his story. Just a long middle chapter. The ending was still being written, and it was a good ending. A second chance. A hidden past revealed. A problem solved not just on a whiteboard but in a life. Sang-woo picked up a marker and walked to his whiteboard. He had research to do, theorems to prove, students to teach. He had mathematics to contribute to the world. After 25 years, the janitor had become a mathematician again. And this time he would not forget who he was.